It's called For the Jolly Man. Taking my cock out of Joni Mitchell's ass, I immediately regret what I have just done and wipe it against her sweater, as though this act will somehow obliterate the unseemliness of our preceding rut. She notices what I'm doing and looks away out the window with feigned casualness. I'm feeling a little anxious myself, a little nervous, and I blurt out, "How do you like driving that Lincoln Navigator?" She looks back over her shoulder and says, "I like it fine. Its seat is very comfortable." "Big, too," I say, as I zip up my jeans, careful not to catch my cock in its teeth, before I shuffle out to a driveway I can skate away on, almost silent, almost ignorant of the shame I have created in this country and also in the countries that border it. So the thing is, this goes to this is a book. This is the text of a book that I wrote for Dennis the other night. When Dennis and I first met was at a ATP festival.
That's not true. We met earlier.
Yeah.
You don't have a memory. That's the problem.
Whatever. It was one of those times. Anyway, we were hanging at an ATP festival, and I was telling him some stories about when I lived out in San Francisco in the late 70s, and I was sort of a wastrel. And I really didn't live anywhere, and, you know, I was telling him stories about being a drunk, and he was like, "Oh, you have to, like, do a book of these." And I was like, yeah. And so every time I'd email, he'd go like, how's it coming? And I'd be like, "Oh, you know, great." And so this went on for many years. And then one night I decided, like, okay, I'll write the fucking book. And it's called Days of Plasma, Nights of Drink. And one thing that may not translate, I mean, there's stuff that might not translate very well, but one thing specifically is the acronym SRO, which stands for Single Room Occupancy, which is a type of hotel that was specific. I don't know if they still have them, but it used to be in the Skid Rows of the United States. There were these SROs where you could get a single room that didn't have a bathroom in it. It had a bathroom down the hall. It just had a sink in it. And it was mostly bums who lived in it. And I was a bum. Anyway, this is called Days of Plasma, Nights of Drink. First poem is called Alpha. It's easier to slip through the cracks than it sometimes appears. In the late 70s, for a good long while in San Francisco, which was a real goddamn cheap place to live, before it got taken over by the Hong Kong money fuckers and their slaves, longest, steadiest gig I had when I lived there was selling plasma at the Alpha Plasma Center down in the Mission before yuppies ruled that zone. The place looked like the reception area of any cheap-ass medical facility or the welfare office or something. But they had a big sign up on one wall that spelled out our mission. $7 first time in week, $8 second time in week, $10 eighth time in month. The idea was that they always needed more plasma, which is what binds whole blood. They use it for burn victims and plastic surgery disasters and whatever the fuck else. And a healthy human regenerates the stuff faster than shit. So while you can only sell blood every so often, you can dump plasma twice a week. And so I did, for a year or two anyway, until it made me needle shy. What you do is go in and lie down on some table where they'd siphon out whole blood, then spin it around for a while. The red cells and other shit would centrifuge to the bottom. At which point they'd hook you up with a bag of the red stuff and a bag of salt water. And you'd try your hardest to suck it all back in with thirsty veins and what passed for a can-do attitude. There'd be occasional gruesome shit, usually when people fucked around and got the needle stuck into the wrong spot. But mostly it was pretty quiet. I'd read porn paperbacks and snooze while the shit trickled back in. This was before AIDS, so they were pretty cavalier about screening, unless you were obviously loaded. In which case I presume they thought you'd wiggle around too much to be a truly great blood spigot. Which is of course what we all were. Portable bags of blood, ready to be milked, so that plastic surgeons wouldn't have to cry more than they already did. The fucking sissies.
Youpie, youpie.
It's called Bringer of Hot Tips. Before I became a plasma donor, one of my better steady gigs was as a circular delivery guy. I don't know if they have them here, but in Cali at that time they sure did. There were these advertising sheets. Sometimes they'd have coupons on them, sometimes just hot tips. And in the morning when you got up, you'd find one or two of the things stuck into your door handle or screen, as though during the night, a close pal had remembered to remind you about a very special bargain you'd be sure to enjoy. I'd never really thought about much where the damn things came from, but it was exciting to find out they originated in big cloth bags worn by shuffling drunks who emerged in the pre-dawn dark from plain-looking delivery vans that stopped on the corners of various suburban neighborhoods, burping unseemly turds one by one onto deserted corners of paradise, so that we could wrap the dumb things with rubber bands and slip them delicately into the lattices outside these little mansions, as though we were clever elves or big thirsty squirrels who were delighted when our van would dump us for lunch at the portal of the local cut-rate liquor store and would receive an advance of $1 for each hour we worked thus far, the balance to be paid by check 1 week hence, if we could but find the company's unmarked mission doorway one more time when it was light and would have to squint. The realm of Dirk. Most evenings around dinner time, unless something else was up, I'd usually find myself heading for North Beach. This was not because I was a beatnik or that I had the money for a strip club, but rather because North Beach was the place where a guy named Dirk Dirksen ran a punk club called the Mabuhay Gardens. I guess it was a Filipino restaurant during the day, although I'm not sure, but they used to have a Filipino buffet on weeknights if you got there early enough, which I often did, since free food tastes the best. And I always appreciated the fact that most of their bartenders would accept food stamps in lieu of money for beverages purchased and drunk by thirsty pogoers, giving them change in American cash. For a while, I was the editor of the club's in-house fanzine, but that was mostly a scam set up by an older writer, so I'd always be able to get in for free, which was cool with me. It was a pretty decent place, although the weekend doorman started patting me down pretty thoroughly, attempting to find the bottles of rum I liked to carry around in those days. I'd have to have a friend duct tape them to the small of my back, with various dangling tubes to deliver the liquid. These always just looked like some stupid-ass new wave jewelry, no worse than any other. So I was usually able to smuggle the stuff in. It all fell apart one night after I'd gotten some money and tried to get the doorman to let me run straight through the glass front door. I kept thinking it would be so great to leave a cartoon outline of broken glass. It would definitely be worth paying for the damage. But he'd have none of it. So while we wrestled, he discovered the bottle I had taped under my shirt. So that was the end of yet another near-perfect scheme. That same night, I remember telling my friend Emily, "Hey, watch this." Always a bad thing to say. But she laughed as I stomped around on the hood of a cop car. The last thing I remember her saying was, "I have the distinct feeling this is not going to end well." And of course, she was right. Golden Gate Mac. Probably the briefest job I held during my days in SF was the gig I had at the McDonald's on Haight Street, right at the mouth of Golden Gate Park. I only had it for a couple of weeks, but I was pretty glad when I first got it because I'd just gotten kicked out of the apartment where I was staying because I had mistakenly pissed on a roommate's younger sister. She'd been on the road following the dead, and she was sleeping in front of the fireplace, which you have to admit could be confused for a toilet if it was dark and you were very, very drunk. Anyway, I had then taken up residence in a tree near the eastern end of the park, so it was a very convenient job for me. The only problem was that it totally sucked. I was the only person there who wasn't from the Philippines, and the manager, Manny, thought I was slow because I couldn't understand the training videos, which were in fucking Tagalog or some similar tongue. But I didn't care much, since his evaluation meant I mostly got to stand around in the parking lot, holding a broom and trying to make sure non-customers didn't take advantage of our lot's excellent location while visiting the park without a Big Mac in hand. This meant I could smoke at work, which was okay, but Manny was a fascist about drinking at work, even though drink and smoke are natural allies, and he would have none of it, not even beer. Like I said, the job sucked. But at least it meant I could show employment, which meant I could get room at this SRO up at the corner of Cole and Stanton for $65 a month, which was an excellent price, since I could make that just selling plasma, which was a much better job than McDonald's. Although it was fun to walk around the hate in my uniform late at night, or to wear it to some punk show. Ain't life just full of choices? Smarty pants. Living at the nameless SRO wasn't too bad. Most of the other residents were hardcore alkies, and most of them were a few years older than myself, but they didn't hold my relative youth against me. Although they did think it was funny and stupid that I drank Mickey's Big Mouth malt liquor as my beverage of choice, when it was clear to every man-jack of them that fortified wines, such as Gallo White Port, delivered a whole lot more punch per penny panhandled. My main gripe with their argument was I didn't like the way the sweet wine sat on my tongue. Mickey's tasted gall-darn sophisticated in comparison. I tell my hallmates this, and they sneered at my words. This shit will get you just as hammered, I told them, but they were having none of it, declaring me a weak cocksucker and having none of it. But the truth of my statement was proven sooner rather than later. The building manager put up a notice on each door reminding us the exterminators were coming. They were going to be doing a big fumigation one Thursday night, and we'd better have our asses clear of our rooms. This fact registered vaguely in my brain, but there was some good show happening the previous evening, and I staggered home on the late side. Maybe it was one of those nights where I was flat broke and had to walk back over the hills. I can't really remember. But I was white by the time I hit my bed. In those days, all I had in my room was a bare mattress with a large beach towel thrown over it. I could either sleep atop or beneath the towel, depending on the weather. It must have been summer, since I slept on top of it that night, and awoke coughing to find my room filled with white gas of some sort. At first I thought it was smoke, but it smelled pretty weird for smoke. Then I realized my body was covered with dead and dying cockroaches, which made me jump the hell out of bed, and also to remember the notice that had been presented earlier. I ran to the nearly closed window and threw it open. I drew a deep breath of fresh air, watching the white gas billow out. Then I heard loud laughing and looked across the street. There were a bunch of my fellow residents sprawled around a bus stop bench, pointing at my window. I looked over and shrugged sheepishly. They were obviously more capable of looking out for themselves than I was, despite their ragged-ass condition. One or two of them held up what looked to be a bottle of Gallo White Port. He pointed to it, then drained the bottle's contents into his mouth. Tossing it into the garbage can, he then pointed to his head and yelled, "Brain food!" How can I argue? Wisdom galore. At the SRO I lived in was across the street from a laundromat used by blue-collar neighborhood types, as well as students from the UCSF Med School, which was just up the hill. I was washing my meager wardrobe there one day when a fellow drunk from my building came in. He asked what I was doing when I told him my laundry. He said that was one of the stupidest things he'd ever heard. He went on to explain that if you wanted clean clothes, all you had to do was to wait until someone about your own size came in. Keep an eye on their load as they shifted it from washer to dryer. Then, when it was about ready, you just go through it and take what you need. If you feel guilty, just toss your own dirty clothes into their load. You can walk out and slightly damp but totally new set of duds. I was skeptical at first, but when I thought about it, I began to see the good sense in his approach. It would not only save time, but quarters and dimes as well. Money that could be used for bargain bin singles at Aquarius, or the 75-cent breakfast special down on Valencia, or a 60-cent pack of Chesterfield Kings. I can't remember the guy's name who told me this, but I owe him a debt of gratitude. Perhaps even a fat Cuban cigar. Toweling off. One time I was taking a shower in the bathroom at the SRO. Since the only water in the room itself was a sink, fine for pissing, but not much else. So I go down to the bathroom wrapped in a towel, and I scrub myself top to bottom, and I head back to my room, only to discover, gadzooks, the door is fucking locked. I fiddle around with the thing for a while, then I try to find another resident who might be home this afternoon. But no one else is around and nothing fucking works. My room is up on the second floor, and I jimmy the front door of the building open so I can survey the scene from the sidewalk. And really, it looks sort of doable. The first floor windows are covered with iron bars that curve out a little bit at the top, and they have spiked peaks, but not super sharp looking ones. And I'm thinking, I could make it up to the top of those. If I can make it, my guess is the bottom lip of my windowsill is reachable, at least by fingertips. And I reckon that I can haul myself up if I can get a decent purchase on the ledge. With the window open, I should just be able to slide right in. There are a couple sets of crossbars on the window, and the first part of the ascent is actually pretty easy. I'm really glad the towel I'm wearing is a jumbo beach thing. Hopefully no one will recognize it as as part of their own purloined laundry. Anyway, I finally get a knee up on the upper crossbar, and I slowly start working my hands up the building's stucco side, trying to pretend there's a bit more to hang on to than there actually is. I manage to keep myself pressed tight to the side of the wall, and I slowly inch upwards, hoping I will feel the bottom edge of the windowsill any goddamn second. I'm standing tiptoe on the upper crossbeam, but I can't touch the sill yet. I look up carefully and see I'm still about 4 inches short of my target. This means I'll have to rest my weight on top of the spikes, but just for a little bit. I look at them closely, and it doesn't seem like they're sharp enough to actually pierce your skin, at least if you do it right. And my plan is to do it as right as any man in a similar position has ever done it. I snake my right foot slowly up to the top of the nearest spike and gingerly begin to shift some weight onto it. It doesn't actually feel too bad, so I am heartened. I start to move the weight of my left foot up to a spike as well, but as I do this, with the bottom edge of the sill ever closer, I can feel my body begin to peel away from the wall as the size of my ass begins to exert its own gravitational pull. I fall straight back, my hands raised in empty, clinging gestures. And I sail towards the sidewalk, landing on my back while the towel opens and flutters around me, providing a small cushion for my buttocks, but little other protection. And just then, the N Judah train stops, mere inches from where my head lays on the sidewalk. I'm dazed, but not unconscious, and I just lie there as the folks get off the train, carefully step around me and my towel. Then I get up, wrap myself in the towel, and go back upstairs where I kick the door in. I mean, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Shoe Leather Express. I decided to leave in San Francisco in the fall of 1979, although I did return in the new year. I have usually told my friends the reason I left was a guy I know told me he'd get me a job washing dishes in Ketchum, Idaho, where I could meet Mary L. Hemingway. But another part of the reason I left had to do with a bottle of red vermouth, a punk chick with a heavy 5 o'clock shadow, and a pair of hospital slippers. I'll spare you the details until we meet again, although I did eventually meet Mary L. Hemingway. These are some other ones. A bunch of these are from a record that Chris Corsano put out called Dating Tips for Touring Bands. Some are, some are not. This is called a club for friars. We can all see this light shining out from the front of Don Rickles' trousers. And there's something moving around, too, like an elephant's trunk or the arm of an octopus. It has caused a scene this afternoon at the Russian tea room, but Rickles prowls the table unconcerned about the babble surrounding the events below his waist. Finally, Rudolph Giuliani can take it no longer. He was the mayor of New York. He jumps up from his table, runs up to Rickles, and rips down his pants. Rickles falls to the floor, banging his head, and his penis, which is all lit up somehow, begins to grow in a very strange way. It becomes huge, misshapen. He is unconscious, but his penis is moving, curving around like a cobra. It is all Giuliani can do to jam its luminous head into his mouth and start chewing like a madman trying to saw his teeth through the rough skin of Rickles' chode. There's blood everywhere. Rudy's eyes are bugging out of his head and both his hands are locked around Rickles' writhing shaft, trying to keep it from flailing too much. It is a goddamn heroic effort from this mouth-breathing baldy. And when he finally succeeds, finally chews all the way through Rickles' rude unit, a roar goes up from the crowd, and they lift Rudy to their shoulders and carry him around the room, all of them cheering his name, while Rickles lies still under a half-wrecked table, pumping red stuff out of his organ stump. This one's called Living and Dining in the West, which actually was about there was a club that was open for a month that Kim Gordon, Yuta Coder ran, and this it was a gallery way over on the west side of Manhattan, next to this. It was a really old street. It was a really weird little place that was getting closed up because they were tearing it down to build a twin to this magnificent office apartment building crap thing that was going up, and there was one already up there that supposedly Madonna had gotten a room in. And conversely, in the 70s, way over on this part of the west side was a really weird area. It was over by where there were a lot of gay bars, which are still there, but there were these weird hetero bars there also that would be set up in the way they used to have Bowery bars set up earlier in the 70s, which would be there'd be kind of a couple of boards up on top of rustic shit, and these guys behind him serving beer, and women would dance on the bar and you could eat their pussies for $1. And anyway, it'd be nice as hell to rip a loose brick right straight out of that cute cobblestone street or alley or lane or whatever and heave that little red bastard all the way through those big glass towers, right in one side and right out the other, carrying Madonna's underpants and whatever kind of other stupid, priceless shit fills those dumpy rooms. Sending it all sailing through the air like the most patriotic tampon ever shot out of a cannon. Across the West Side Highway, trailing streamers past where the dancers let you eat their pussies for $1 when Abe Beam was king and dining was still affordable. This one's called 15 an Ounce. This is a true story. There was something about my girlfriend Sharon's belly that always made it appear to be the perfect place for cleaning an ounce of the ragweed you could buy in North Jersey in the 4th spring of Nixon. But you'd usually start laughing when my sorting got serious, so the cheeb would end up all over the goddamn sheets, where it was hard as hell to tell apart from the crumbs and the stains and everything else, because we never cleaned the bed very well either. But the mattress had been free, and the pot was only 15 an ounce. We each made $4 an hour wearing stupid cartoon costumes, walking around in an amusement park, so life was pretty good. And the bed was fine for fucking, even if the pot wasn't that good or that clean. I mean, hey, what do you want really for 15 an ounce? This is from these are from a Lady here, which is a book that Christina Carter put out. Miracle on West 11th. It seemed the tips of Alice Coltrane's Natural were treated with something that made her corona phosphoresce when the light hit her hair. It was as though she'd been dipped in the urine of heavenly angels by Max Gordon himself, scant moments before she took the stage at the Vanguard. A Museum for Natural History. This is another lady hair poem. These were it's a series of poems that, like, Christina Carter asked me to, she was like, oh, you should do a book about, like, a subject. I was like a subject? I was like, well, like what? She's like, I don't know. I was like, well, how about, like, women's hair? She was like, oh, that sounds great. So I was like, oh, okay. A Museum for Natural History. Back when I was drunk all the time, late 70s and so on, many was the morning when I'd wake up one place or another, maybe the SRO where I lived, maybe an alley, maybe your couch, and I would discover a hank or strand of lady hair hidden somewhere about my person. If the hair was in my teeth, I'd find it pretty fast and maybe even use it for floss. But if the hair was crusted to my dick or intricately woven into my pubes or something, I might not find it for a good long while. And in retrospect, it probably would have been a good idea for me to save these pubes and to label them and to display them with nostalgic affection, the way that Francois Truffaut archived the pictures of his dead in the green room. But that would have meant remembering names that had been mumbled in places where memory does not function, and then figuring out a way to actually save the hairs in a manner that made sense. I mean, I agree it would have been nice to put them in frames, but I didn't have any frames. So I would have had to press them into books as though they were forgotten Victoria-era rose petals or something. But really, the only books I had at that time were beat-up Olympia Press paperbacks from some used bookstore on Polk. And it's unclear whether or not these would have done the trick that deserved to be done, which was, after all, pressing lady hair flat for further, more sobering even, investigation by my generation and other generations yet to come. This is a snatch gobble for Abby. There's a great line somewhere, I think it's in one of those Abby Hoffman books, where in order to negate objection to oral sex proffered by a woman in self-conscious menses, the potential snap gobbler, be it guy or be it gal, is supposed to say, I like my meat rare. But that line always slayed me, although the few times I actually tried to use it myself, I mumbled. So there's no telling how it actually went over. This is another lady hair poem. It's called Go Tigers. Albert Einstein and Lester Young became good friends during the year. Lester taught a workshop on improvisational thinking in the physics department at Princeton University. In one downbeat yearbook, there's a great photo shot by Art Kane in the lounge of the Princeton Faculty Club showing Lester and Albert smiling by a big bowl of scotch and ice. Albert is sticking out his tongue and sort of lapping at the stuff humorously, while Lester has a long metal straw stuck into the bowl, and he's sucking on it languorously like a pasha at a hookah. Lester is laughing, and Albert's eyes are all crinkled up, like he's been laughing too, and that was, I suppose, typical of their relationship. Since Lester told Leonard Feather in a contemporary interview, only published years later, that Albert, quote, was a sweet, jokey little motherfucker with a real crazy do. Einstein never made public comment on these friendships in the jazz community, but in his journal there's an entry dated March 3rd, 1950, where he notes, had a great session today with Prez and Little Jazz. We played some of Gigi's wonderful old songs, and Prez started calling me Lady Hair. I can hardly wait to see the look on Bernie's face when I tell him. Both Young and Eldridge outlived Einstein by years, and there's a recording in the Library of Congress archives of them playing a beautiful set of duets on the Gershwin themes that Einstein so loved at his funeral. Billie Holiday was there also, but she did not sing. It's a festival memory, Lollapalooza. A squat, a milking stool that sits near the stoop leading up to and down from Courtney's aching cunt. I am doing the Saturday New York Times crossword puzzle, without looking, filling in the blanks one-handed with sputs of bloody jizz, while I think about a donut I ate once on a bus outside of New Haven, and how nasty it really tasted. That was, well, that's sort of true. There was a Lollapalooza where the Hole was on. And man, like Hole was on it and Pavement was on it. And Courtney Love was running around like a maniac, challenging like everybody in Pavement. I can do the New York Times crossword puzzle faster than you can. And it was like, and it was so wrong. It was just so wrong. How I survived until college. The other day I was looking through an issue of In Transit from the late 60s, and I ran across a few pics of a woman whose cunt was locked to my mouth for many hours in my ravish bachelor days. Her apartment would get real hot, and I could just about see the steam boiling out of her crack when I'd push aside her hand-painted panties, which looked pretty nice, although they didn't have a lot of give. But truthfully, I didn't much care. In the heat and the steam and the general mutual gobbling pleasure of the moment, whether they had any give at all. But looking at this pic of my old pal, in this crazy poetry mag, I thought back to what I would have been like at the very moment she was posing in this wonderful slum goddess ecstasy. And the vision of myself in junior high school, in New Jersey, playing tennis and jacking off, made me wonder if the only reason I had actually survived that grim era was the foreknowledge somehow I would eventually have the juices of this beautiful woman smeared across my face like so much sweat from another losing game. The Wilson School, this is a lady here poem as well, I'm sorry. I do not consider myself to be a hair fetishist, yet I have been moved more than once to some extreme emotion or another by a woman's artful shake of her bangs. This may well be due to the fact that I had my first sexual glimmerings during that portion of the 60s in which bangs and heavy eye makeup were worn by the most savory of the older girls at my school. And when one of them would deign to make eye contact with me, at luncheon time perhaps, across the room and from under her personal teepee of hair, I would feel a change in my body's relative pressure, as though she had in fact appeared naked, standing alongside my bathtub at home, while I showered, parting the plastic curtains slowly and beckoning to me with nothing more than well-controlled, insanely long, and artificially thickened eyelashes. This is for my George Bush series. It's called The Vice President is Open. We have a dinner table with place settings for 700 people inside Dick Cheney's penis. But no one ever visits us at meal times, and so the table is empty. There are fine highways fit for international first-class travel by bus inside Dick Cheney's penis, but we have no gasoline for our vehicles, and so the highways are empty. We have an excellent racetrack for the racing of horses and dogs inside Dick Cheney's penis, but we have lost our yen for betting, and so the racetrack seats are empty. Had we known, my friends and I, that life would be so cold, so barren inside Dick Cheney's penis, we wouldn't have never climbed into it trying to escape the flash of American bombs. But we did not know. And so when our friends told us to run, we entered the first cavern we saw, little knowing it was one entrance to the magic cave that is Dick Cheney's penis. At first we thought we were in heaven. The skies were so blue they looked like paints. The grasses under our feet were so lush, the water of the lakes and rivers so twinkly, but Dick Cheney's penis is not heaven. We came to understand our plight, the fact no one can hear our cries, or hear the discharge of our weapons, or the way we honk the horns of the buses which were stranded inside Dick Cheney's penis. It seems we were among the last groups of people to enter these hallowed grounds, but we were surely not the first to roam this precinct. For the bushes are littered with white bones, and there is furniture covered with blood in every room we search. Our forlorn adventures carry us through endless days. It is difficult for us to tell time inside Dick Cheney's penis because we hear the ringing of many bells, but we can never tell which direction they are, or even what it is that they signify. So here we are, still, sitting, dreaming of you and the lives we have left outside this husky shell. A shell it seems we are fated to never leave, magnificent as the man who waves it proudly at his dance partners, but doomed, fated to starve and fill with the brine, like the turtles who live in his scrotum, once singing, now gargling, their song of death lovely in the air of the night. Birth of a Nation, another Bush poem, sorry. Surely by now we have all heard the one about Barbara Bush lacquering her hairdo for so long that beetles came and lived under its protective crust, burrowing holes through her scalp, exploring the nooks of her hollow skull, until one day they hit a nerve somewhere, and she began vomiting in pain, and there, amongst the chunks of beef, and the slabs of butter, and the puddles of gruel, and the mountains of suet on the floor of her Texas kitchen, she found a puckered little boy, to whom she gave the name Lil W. After which she stood amidst the human offal, mute and weeping, not so much from the acrid sting of puke, but from the hideousness of her choice in men. And I will finish off with the title poem from the LP, Dating Tips for Touring Bands. Sometimes my wife and I used to watch porn vids together, sitting on a couch at her mom's home in Santa Monica. Then, one time we were watching Taxi Girls, or some other vehicle for the talents of Nancy Suter, whose career I found intriguing in those days. And my wife asked me, why do these guys always have to come in the girl's hair? This was something I hadn't actually noticed before, and I was going to tell her she was off base, way off base, in her assessment, but as I watched the movie, it dawned on me that she was factually accurate, and that her question was valid, and that it was a damn good one, too. Which reminds me of a story about Henry Rollins, but not well enough that I can do it justice.